The salt-laced breeze, carrying the distant cries of gulls and the faint scent of pine, had always been the breath of life for Eleanor in her beloved Willow Creek, Maine. Her two-story clapboard house, its paint slightly weathered by years of coastal storms and sun-drenched summers, stood as a silent sentinel of countless family moments. Each creak of the old floorboards, each sunbeam slanting through the lace-curtained windows held echoes of laughter, whispered secrets, and the comforting rhythm of a life shared with her late husband, Arthur, and their two children, Michael and Emily. Arthur, a man whose gentle humor could thaw the frostiest Maine morning, had been her steadfast companion for over 3 decades. But it was Eleanor's quiet strength, her unwavering devotion that had truly been the bedrock of their family. She'd navigated the boisterous energy of raising Michael and Emily with a calm efficiency, her days a tapestry woven with school plays, little league games, scraped knees kissed better, and the aroma of her legendary blueberry muffins wafting through the house. The stone fireplace in their cozy living room had been the heart of their home, radiating warmth on chilly evenings, a silent witness to countless bedtime stories and family gatherings. Willow Creek, with its close-knit community and the unhurried pace of life, had been the perfect backdrop for their family's story. Eleanor had immersed herself in its gentle rhythms, volunteering at the local historical society, tending her vibrant cottage garden that spilled over with roses and hydrangeas, and finding solace in the quiet companionship of her book club friends. Life hadn't always been picture-perfect, but it had been theirs, a comforting mosaic of shared experiences and unspoken understandings. Then, the familiar narrative took an unexpected and sorrowful turn. Arthur, her anchor, her confidant, the man whose hand she'd instinctively reached for in moments of joy and sorrow, was suddenly gone. The vibrant colors of Eleanor's world seemed to fade to a muted gray, and a silence descended upon the Willow Creek house, a stark and unsettling contrast to the comforting hum of their life together. Michael, ever the ambitious pragmatist, had long since traded the quiet lanes of Willow Creek for the relentless energy of Boston, his days consumed by the demanding world of high finance. Emily, her artistic soul yearning for broader horizons, had embraced the sun-drenched vibrancy of California, her canvases now reflecting the dazzling light and bold colors of the Pacific coast. Eleanor and Arthur had watched their children embark on their own adventures with a bittersweet mixture of pride and a quiet ache of absence. The comfortable fullness of their home had gradually dissipated, leaving behind echoing rooms and a profound sense of quiet. After Arthur's passing, the visits from Michael and Emily became less frequent, carefully scheduled around their busy lives and the demands of their own young families. Phone calls, once a comforting lifeline, dwindled to perfunctory check-ins, their voices often carrying the hurried undertones of packed schedules and distant concerns. Eleanor tried to understand, reminding herself of their responsibilities, their commitments. But the quiet longing for their presence, for the familiar comfort of their voices filling the silence of her home, persisted like a dull ache. She'd often find herself staring at old family photographs, the smiling faces frozen in time, a poignant reminder of the closeness they once shared. The subtle shift in their relationship had been a gradual erosion, like the relentless sea slowly carving away at the coastline. The easy intimacy of their earlier years had been replaced by polite inquiries and carefully worded updates. Eleanor felt a growing distance, a sense of being on the periphery of their lives, no longer the central figure in their daily narratives. The comforting routines that had once defined her days now stretched out, vast and empty, punctuated only by her own solitary activities. And then, the earth beneath Eleanor's feet trembled again, this time with a chilling and undeniable force. The doctor's words, delivered with a gentle but grave tone, echoed in the sterile examination room. "It appears to be cancer, Eleanor." The diagnosis landed like a physical blow, stealing her breath and casting a long, ominous shadow over her already quiet life. Fear, sharp and cold, coiled in her stomach, a constant knot of anxiety that tightened with each passing hour. But beneath the initial shock and the primal fear of the unknown, a deeper, more profound dread began to take root. It was the terrifying prospect of facing this arduous and uncertain journey entirely alone. For decades, Eleanor had been the steadfast caregiver, the one who had nursed Arthur through countless illnesses, who had stayed up through the long nights with a feverish child, who had always offered a comforting presence and unwavering support in times of need. Now, the roles were terrifyingly reversed. Who would be her anchor in this storm? Whose hand would she reach for when fear threatened to overwhelm her? The thought of navigating the daunting landscape of treatments, appointments, and the sheer vulnerability of illness without her children by her side was a heavy weight, a burden that felt almost unbearable in its profound loneliness. She hesitated to share the devastating news with Michael and Emily, a part of her wanting to shield them from worry, not wanting their presence to be motivated by guilt or a sense of obligation. But a deeper, more primal yearning, a visceral need for her children's love and unwavering support in this, her darkest hour, eventually outweighed her protective instincts. With trembling hands, she reached for the phone, her voice betraying a tremor she desperately tried to conceal as she shared the stark and terrifying reality of her diagnosis. Michael and Emily responded with the expected outpouring of concern, their voices laced with shock and sympathy. Promises to visit, assurances of unwavering support echoed across the miles. They said all the comforting things that children say to ailing parents, the familiar script of familial care and concern. But Eleanor, with the quiet wisdom of her years and the subtle intuition that only a mother possesses, detected a note of hesitation, a carefully veiled reluctance that belied their well-intentioned words. Promises, she knew all too well, were often fragile things, easily broken by the relentless demands of their own distant lives. Days turned into a slow, agonizing crawl, each sunrise bringing a fresh wave of hope that quickly dissolved into the stark reality of her solitude. Eleanor waited, a quiet vigil in her familiar Willow Creek home, for the promised visits that never seemed to materialize. The phone remained stubbornly silent, save for the occasional brief call filled with hurried updates about their own lives and more vague assurances of future visits, when things calmed down. Excuses, like flimsy shields against the truth, began to arrive. Michael was immersed in a crucial merger at work, the pressure mounting with each passing day. Emily's children had a relentless schedule of school events, art classes, and playdates, leaving her stretched thin. The miles between them seemed to widen into an unbridgeable chasm, the demands of their distant lives eclipsing the quiet desperation of their mother in her secluded Maine home. The silence from her children became a palpable presence in the house, a heavy, suffocating blanket that settled in the corners of the rooms, a constant and unwelcome reminder of her profound isolation. Eleanor found herself spending increasing amounts of time in her beloved garden, seeking a fragile solace amongst the familiar beauty of her flowers. The vibrant colors of the roses and the delicate hues of the hydrangeas stood in stark contrast to the growing grayness that seemed to be enveloping her spirit. She would often talk to her blooms, whispering her fears and her loneliness to the silent petals, finding a strange and perhaps illusory comfort in their unwavering, rooted presence. As her physical strength began to wane, the undeniable reality of her situation pressed in. The local doctor, his brow furrowed with concern, gently suggested that she might find more comfort and better access to medical care closer to the facilities in Portland. The thought of leaving her cherished Willow Creek, the only home she had ever truly known, the place where every nook and cranny held a precious memory, filled her with a deep and profound sadness. But the chilling prospect of facing her arduous treatments entirely alone in the echoing silence of her quiet house was an even more daunting and terrifying prospect. The difficult decision was made, and Eleanor found herself packing a small, worn suitcase, carefully folding familiar sweaters and cherished photographs, leaving behind the comforting embrace of her home for the sterile and impersonal environment of a Portland hospital. The drive along the winding coastal roads was a blur, the familiar scenery outside the car window, the craggy coastline, the dense pine forests, the charming clapboard houses, a poignant reminder of the life she was temporarily, and perhaps irrevocably, leaving behind. As she was shown to her stark and unfamiliar hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment, the hushed and hurried voices of nurses, and the sterile scent of antiseptic became the new and unwelcome soundtrack to her days. The crisp white sheets of the narrow hospital bed felt cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the worn and welcoming comfort of her own bed in Willow Creek. The nurses were efficient and kind, their care professional and detached. They monitored her vital signs with practiced ease, administered her medications with meticulous precision, and offered polite, albeit impersonal, smiles. But their well-intentioned care couldn't begin to fill the gaping void left by her children's absence. Eleanor longed for the familiar warmth of Michael's steadying hand, the bright and encouraging lilt of Emily's voice. She wanted them there, not out of a sense of duty or obligation, but out of love, out of a genuine desire to offer the unconditional comfort and unwavering support that only a child can truly provide to a parent in their most vulnerable hour. But the days in the hospital continued their slow and monotonous march, marked only by the changing shifts of the nurses and the sterile routines of hospital life. The phone calls from Michael and Emily remained infrequent, brief, and filled with the same well-meaning but ultimately empty promises. The promised visits remained just that, promises, hanging in the air like unfulfilled wishes. Eleanor lay in her narrow hospital bed, the rhythmic beeping of the machines a constant reminder of her fragile existence, the silence from her children a heavy and suffocating weight on her weary heart. The hearth in Willow Creek, the once vibrant center of her family's warmth and connection, had grown cold, its embers long extinguished, leaving Eleanor shivering in an unbearable and profound loneliness, surrounded by the impersonal efficiency of strangers. Life in Willow Creek, Maine, had always revolved around family for Eleanor. Her clapboard house held decades of memories with her late husband, Arthur, and their children, Michael and Emily. Eleanor had been the quiet anchor, her days filled with the gentle rhythms of their small-town life. But as years passed, Michael and Emily built lives in distant cities, Boston and California. The Willow Creek house grew quiet after Arthur's passing, the comfortable routines replaced by a heavy silence. Eleanor found herself increasingly alone, the infrequent calls from her children often feeling rushed and distant. Then came the diagnosis: cancer. Fear was immediate, but the chilling prospect of facing it alone gnawed deeper. Eleanor had always been the caregiver. Now, who would care for her? Hesitant to burden Michael and Emily, she eventually shared the news. Promises to visit followed, but weeks passed with only flimsy excuses echoing on the phone line. Moving to a Portland hospital for treatment, the sterile environment amplified Eleanor's isolation. The nurses were kind, but their professional care couldn't replace the warmth of her children's presence. She longed for their touch, even a fleeting visit, to pierce the sterile atmosphere. But she lay in her hospital bed, the rhythmic beeping of machines her constant companion, her heart sinking with each passing day. The silence from Michael and Emily stretched on, a heavy shroud. The hearth of her family, once so warm, had grown cold, leaving her shivering in an unbearable loneliness. The scent of pine and salt air, so tied to Willow Creek, was replaced by antiseptic. Memories of Arthur's hand in hers during coastal walks, the weight of grandchildren in her arms, now brought sharp longing. Hospital food was bland, a stark contrast to her home-cooked meals. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle. Her journal became a silent confidant, its pages filled with shaky handwriting detailing her loneliness and fear. The well-meaning inquiries from staff about her family became difficult. She didn't want pity, but the absence of her loved ones was a constant ache. Small acts of kindness from nurses underscored the void. As weeks turned into a month, her physical strength waned, mirroring her fading hope. During grueling treatments, the longing for Michael and Emily was almost unbearable, replaced by sterile silence. Staring at a faded photo of her young children, a wave of grief washed over her. Where had that unreserved love gone? The weight of her isolation became a physical burden, the cold reality settling deep within. The Willow Creek hearth, once a symbol of warmth, felt extinguished. The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to amplify the silence, each beep of the medical equipment a stark reminder of her fragile existence, a lonely counterpoint to the imagined comforting sounds of her Willow Creek home. The gentle tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the soft sigh of the wind through the ancient pines outside her bedroom window, the distant laughter of children playing in the neighborhood. These imagined sounds now felt like echoes from a distant, happier past. Eleanor would often close her eyes, trying to conjure the familiar scent of her home. The subtle fragrance of lavender sachets tucked in drawers, the comforting aroma of simmering chicken soup on a cold winter's day, the faint, lingering scent of Arthur's pipe tobacco that still seemed to cling to the old armchair in the living room. But these sensory memories, once so vivid and comforting, now seemed to slip through her grasp like grains of sand, leaving behind only a hollow ache of longing. The bland, institutional meals served on plastic trays were a stark contrast to the simple, hearty fare she had always prepared for her family with such care. She missed the taste of her own perfectly brewed coffee in the morning, the comforting warmth of a slice of her apple pie, the satisfying crunch of her Sunday roast chicken. These small, everyday pleasures now seemed like luxuries from a bygone era, further emphasizing her isolation. Days in the hospital stretched into an indistinguishable blur, marked only by the changing shifts of nurses, the routine blood draws that left her arm bruised and tender, and the increasingly grueling treatments that left her weak and nauseous. The outside world, glimpsed through the narrow window, seemed vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the stagnant stillness of her room. She watched the changing weather, the falling rain mirroring the tears she often couldn't bring herself to shed, the brief glimpses of sunshine offering a fleeting, false sense of hope. Her small, worn journal became her most trusted companion, its pages filling with her shaky script, a testament to her dwindling strength and her growing despair. She poured out her fears, her frustrations, and the crushing weight of her loneliness onto the lined pages, finding a small measure of solace in giving voice to her unspoken pain. The silence from Michael and Emily remained a constant, unspoken presence in her thoughts, a heavy weight that pressed down on her spirit with each passing day. The well-meaning inquiries from the hospital staff about her family became increasingly difficult to navigate. Eleanor would offer a weak smile and a vague, "They're doing fine, thank you," unwilling to burden these kind strangers with the raw and aching disappointment that gnawed at her heart. She didn't want their pity, didn't want to be defined by her children's absence. She was Eleanor Johnson, a woman who had lived a full life, who had nurtured a family with love and devotion. Where had that connection gone? Why did she feel so utterly alone in this, her most vulnerable hour? Even the small acts of kindness from the nurses, a gentle pat on the hand, a cheerful, "How are we feeling today?" while appreciated, only served to underscore the profound absence of the ones whose touch and words held a lifetime of shared history, of unconditional love and understanding. She longed for Michael's steadying presence, for Emily's bright, encouraging smile, for the simple comfort of knowing they were there, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love and concern. As the weeks bled into a long and agonizing month, Eleanor's physical strength continued to wane, mirroring the slow but steady fading of her hope. The cancer treatments were relentless, leaving her body weak and racked with nausea. During these darkest moments, the yearning for her children's presence became almost unbearable, a primal cry for the comfort and reassurance that only they could truly offer. She would close her eyes and imagine Michael sitting beside her, his strong hand gently squeezing hers, Emily's bright voice reading aloud from one of her favorite novels. But the reality was the stark and sterile silence of her room, broken only by the impersonal beeping of the medical machinery that monitored her failing body. One particularly bleak and rainy afternoon, Eleanor's gaze fell upon a faded photograph tucked into the corner of her bedside table. It was a snapshot from a long-ago family vacation, Michael and Emily as young children, their small arms wrapped tightly around her in a spontaneous embrace, their innocent faces beaming with unreserved love and trust. A sudden, overwhelming wave of grief washed over her, sharp and intense, leaving her breathless with a profound sense of loss. Where had that pure, unadulterated affection gone? Had the complexities and demands of adult life truly severed those precious, early bonds of love and connection? The weight of her profound isolation became a tangible, physical burden, pressing down on her chest, making each breath a conscious effort. The cold reality of her solitude settled deep within her bones, a chilling premonition of facing the uncertain and frightening future entirely alone, surrounded by the impersonal efficiency of strangers in a sterile hospital room. The Willow Creek hearth, once the vibrant and comforting symbol of her family's warmth and togetherness, felt as though it had not just grown cold, but had crumbled into a pile of cold, grey ashes, leaving behind only a vast and echoing emptiness in its place. The sterile white walls of Eleanor's Portland hospital room remained her constant companions, reflecting the pale, often grey light that filtered through the window. The rhythmic beeping of the various medical devices surrounding her bed had become a constant, unwavering soundtrack, a stark and lonely counterpoint to the cherished memories of the comforting sounds of her Willow Creek home, the cheerful chirping of crickets on a warm summer evening, the gentle rustling of leaves in the autumn breeze that whispered through the ancient maples, the familiar and reassuring tick-tock of the old grandfather clock that stood sentinel in the hallway. These auditory memories, once a source of profound comfort and a tangible link to a happier past, now often brought a sharp pang of longing, a bittersweet ache for a life that felt increasingly distant and perhaps irrevocably lost. Days in the sterile confines of the hospital stretched into an indistinguishable blur, each one seemingly a pale imitation of the last. The early morning ritual of blood draws, the lukewarm coffee served in a flimsy styrofoam cup, the brief, often impersonal visits from the nurses as they efficiently checked her charts and adjusted her medications. These were the only discernible markers of time in her increasingly isolated world. The promised visits from Michael and Emily remained a recurring source of disappointment, their continued absence a heavy, unspoken weight that settled deeper in her chest with each passing day, a constant and painful reminder of her diminished importance in the intricate and demanding tapestry of their busy lives. Then, one particularly dreary afternoon, as a persistent and melancholic drumming of rain against the windowpane seemed to undersay her own inner sadness, the quiet stillness of Eleanor's room was subtly yet significantly disrupted. The hushed rustling of starched hospital sheets and the soft murmur of unfamiliar voices announced the arrival of a new patient in the bed situated directly beside hers. This young woman, who looked barely out of her teenage years, possessed a delicate fragility, her slender frame almost swallowed by the crisp, impersonal hospital gown. Her face, pale and luminous, was etched with a weariness that seemed far too heavy a burden for her tender age. Her name, Eleanor quietly gleaned from the hushed introductions of the nurses as they adjusted her pillows and deftly connected her to a series of beeping and blinking monitors, was Lily. Lily was engaged in her own quiet and courageous battle, though Eleanor cautiously gleaned from the brief, hushed exchanges of medical jargon that her illness was in an earlier, and perhaps more hopeful, stage than her own advanced condition. Despite the significant chasm of years that separated them and the vastly different paths that life had unexpectedly led them both to share the sterile and impersonal confines of a hospital room, an immediate, unspoken connection sparked between them, a fragile yet persistent flicker of shared humanity in the often dim and disheartening atmosphere of the cancer ward. Perhaps it was the raw and undeniable vulnerability of their shared circumstances, the quiet understanding that bloomed in the antiseptic air, a silent acknowledgement of the common, unseen adversary they both faced with a mixture of trepidation and a quiet, inner resolve. Lily, despite her own evident physical discomfort and the pallor of her complexion that spoke of her own internal struggle, possessed a remarkable inner strength, a quiet and unwavering resilience that shone through her large, luminous eyes. She didn't treat Eleanor with the polite, detached courtesy that often characterized the fleeting interactions between fellow patients in the sterile environment of the hospital. From the very moment she was settled into her bed, her bright, inquisitive gaze met Eleanor's with a genuine warmth, a spark of youthful curiosity and an innate kindness that seemed to cut through Eleanor's weary reserve like a welcome ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. She initiated conversation with a soft but surprisingly clear voice, sharing small, everyday details about her day, her feelings, the anxieties that occasionally flickered like fleeting shadows in her youthful gaze. She spoke to Eleanor not merely as just another ailing body occupying the adjacent bed, but as a person, a fellow traveler unexpectedly sharing a difficult and uncertain journey, her genuine interest a refreshing balm to Eleanor's weary spirit. Initially, Eleanor responded with a quiet and somewhat hesitant reserve, her voice often raspy from disuse and the lingering weight of her profound loneliness. Years of quiet strength and ingrained self-reliance had made her instinctively hesitant to burden others with the heavy weight of her own fears and struggles. But Lily's gentle persistence, her unaffected kindness, and her genuine interest in Eleanor's well-being began to slowly but surely chip away at the protective wall that Eleanor had unknowingly and instinctively erected around her wounded heart. Lily asked about Eleanor's day, not with a perfunctory politeness, but with a sincere and heartfelt curiosity. She inquired about Eleanor's family. Her life before the sterile confines of the hospital had become her temporary reality, her cherished memories of her home in Willow Creek. There was a refreshing sincerity in her questions, a stark and welcome contrast to the hurried and often distracted inquiries Eleanor had grown accustomed to from her own children during their brief and infrequent phone calls. Slowly, tentatively, Eleanor began to open up, sharing small, carefully chosen anecdotes about her life in the peaceful embrace of Willow Creek. She spoke of Arthur's gentle, often dry humor that could always bring a smile to her face, the mischievous glint that would appear in his eyes when he'd play harmless pranks. She recounted fond tales of Michael's boundless childhood energy and his insatiable curiosity about the world, and she reminisced about Emily's early artistic endeavors, the vibrant colors that had always seemed to spontaneously spill from her young hands, filling their home with joyful creations. As she spoke, the memories, often tinged with a poignant sadness in her solitary moments of reflection, seemed to take on a different, warmer hue, illuminated by Lily's attentive listening and her soft interjections of sympathy or understanding. Lily's youthful perspective often offered a fresh and unexpected lens through which Eleanor could momentarily view her past, a gentle and comforting reminder of the genuine joys and deep connections that had once so richly defined her life. Lily possessed a remarkable and endearing knack for finding small, unexpected pockets of levity even within the often somber and emotionally charged atmosphere of their shared circumstances. She'd make gentle, self-deprecating jokes about the often bland and utterly unidentifiable hospital food, sharing funny anecdotes about her own youthful misadventures and her clumsy, often disastrous attempts at cooking before her illness had unexpectedly confined her to the sterile environment of the hospital. Her quiet laughter, like a delicate and unexpected melody in the otherwise silent room, would often bring a small, involuntary smile to Eleanor's lips, a fleeting but welcome respite from the persistent weight of her sadness. Eleanor found herself responding with small, hesitant smiles at first, then a soft, almost forgotten chuckle, a sound she hadn't realized had been dormant within her for so long, a cherished melody unexpectedly rediscovered in the most unlikely of places. She couldn't even clearly recall the last time she had truly laughed, a genuine, heartfelt sound that wasn't somehow tinged with the underlying sadness of her present circumstances or the polite masking of her deep inner turmoil. She couldn't readily remember the last time she had truly felt anything other than the dull ache of disappointment and the gnawing fear that had become her constant and unwelcome companions. But Lily's quiet yet persistent youthful energy, her remarkable and unwavering zest for life that stubbornly refused to be extinguished by the encroaching shadow of her illness, was subtly and unexpectedly infectious. Despite the tangle of 4 drips that snaked around their arms and the various tubes connecting them to the humming and blinking machines that silently monitored their fragile bodies, Lily somehow managed to keep things remarkably light. Her presence became a small but significant beacon of unexpected warmth and genuine human connection in the often sterile and isolating environment of the cancer ward. She began to notice the small, almost imperceptible ways in which Lily quietly and thoughtfully helped her, often anticipating Eleanor's needs before she even consciously voiced them. She'd reach for the water pitcher on the often too distant bedside table when Eleanor's arm felt leaden with fatigue and weakness, offering a surprisingly steady and strong hand when Eleanor needed to navigate the short, unsteady journey to the bathroom. Lily's youthful strength was a surprising and welcome contrast to her own fragile appearance, and her quiet assistance was always offered with a natural, unassuming kindness that touched Eleanor deeply, a silent and heartfelt language of empathy and genuine care that transcended the boundaries of age and circumstance. It was the first time in what felt like an eternity that Eleanor hadn't felt utterly and completely alone in her arduous journey. She hadn't fully realized the profound depth of her desperate need for genuine human connection until Lily's unexpected presence began to slowly but surely fill the aching void left by her children's prolonged and disheartening absence. Her heart still ached with their continued silence, with the sting of their unfulfilled promises, and the persistent, gnawing feeling of being somehow forgotten or relegated to the periphery of their busy lives. But Lily, despite her own considerable struggles and the weight of her own young battle, was right there, a constant and unwavering presence, showing up in a tangible and meaningful way that Michael and Emily, for all their well-intentioned but ultimately empty words, had simply not. The days continued to unfold in their slow, deliberate rhythm within the confines of their shared hospital room, and with each passing one, Eleanor found herself increasingly looking forward to Lily's quiet and comforting companionship. The young woman's unexpected inner strength, her unwavering optimism that flickered like a resilient flame in the face of adversity, became a comforting anchor in the turbulent sea of Eleanor's complicated emotions. She began to confide more deeply in Lily, sharing the heavier anxieties and unspoken disappointments that she had kept locked away in the solitary corners of her heart, her lingering regrets about the past, her gnawing fears about the uncertain future, and the profound sadness that shadowed her thoughts whenever she considered her fractured relationship with Michael and Emily. She spoke to Lily about Arthur, about their life in Willow Creek, the comfortable and familiar rhythm of their many years together, the quiet joys and shared sorrows that had woven the fabric of their life. Lily listened intently, her bright eyes often mirroring Eleanor's own emotions, offering a quiet word of comfort, a gentle nod of understanding, or simply a steady and reassuring presence to lean on in moments of particular vulnerability. In return, Lily began to share more of her own young life, a life already marked by significant loss and hardship. She spoke with a quiet courage about losing her mother at a young age and the subsequent absence of a father who had never truly been a part of her life. She recounted her experiences growing up in the often unpredictable world of foster care, moving from one unfamiliar and temporary home to another, a childhood characterized by instability and the profound absence of a consistent and loving family. Eleanor could feel the raw and unvarnished pain in Lily's soft voice, a pain that resonated with a different, perhaps even deeper, kind of loneliness than her own. Michael and Emily had never abandoned her in the literal way that Lily had been abandoned, but in those shared moments of vulnerability and heartfelt confession, Eleanor began to understand the deep-seated emptiness that Lily carried within her, a fundamental human longing for connection, belonging, and the unconditional love of a family. It was a pain that Eleanor, in her own way, recognized, a shared human experience of yearning for something essential that had been. And so, within the quiet confines of their shared hospital room, an unlikely and profound bond began to form. A fragile yet resilient tapestry woven from shared vulnerability and mutual empathy. Two women, separated by decades of life experience and vastly different pasts, found an unexpected common ground in their shared human need for connection and understanding. In a strange and unforeseen way, Lily began to fill the aching void left by Eleanor's absent children, her youthful presence a surprising balm to Eleanor's wounded spirit. She became, in many ways, the daughter Eleanor had always longed for. The one who truly saw her, who cared for her not out of familial obligation but out of genuine affection and a deeply empathetic heart, who offered a steady and unwavering presence when Eleanor felt utterly and heartbreakingly alone. Eleanor had never consciously sought this unexpected kinship, this surprising source of comfort in her darkest hour, but a profound and burgeoning gratitude began to bloom in her heart for this remarkable young woman who had unexpectedly entered her life and offered a lifeline of human connection in the sterile landscape of her illness. But with this burgeoning gratitude and the unexpected warmth of Lily's companionship came an unsettling and increasingly undeniable truth, a stark and painful realization that the deep, unconditional connection and unwavering support she so desperately craved from her own children might never truly materialize in the way she had always hoped. Their continued absence, punctuated by brief and often hurried phone calls, spoke volumes, revealing a painful truth about their current priorities and the distance that had grown between them. The more Eleanor quietly reflected on their infrequent contact and the long list of unfulfilled promises, the more she began to understand that she couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep waiting for a depth of care and presence that they seemed unwilling or perhaps simply unable to offer in this crucial time of her life. She realized that she needed to make a fundamental shift in her own heart, to adjust her expectations and to find solace and connection in the unexpected places where it was genuinely offered. And deep down, with a growing sense of clarity, she knew that Lily, this remarkable young woman who had so little in the way of worldly possessions or traditional family ties, had given her something far more valuable: genuine companionship, unwavering support, and a profound sense of being seen and truly cared for. That night, as Eleanor lay in her hospital bed, the rhythmic beeping of the machines a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present shadow of her mortality, her thoughts turned inward with a newfound sense of clarity and resolve. A significant decision began to solidify in the quiet depths of her mind, a decision that felt both radical and profoundly right, a quiet act of rebellion against the loneliness that had threatened to consume her. She would make Lily her heir. It wasn't simply about material possessions or the modest estate she would eventually leave behind. It was about something far more profound. It was about giving Lily something real, something solid and tangible, something that the young woman, who had navigated a life marked by instability and loss, had never truly possessed before. A sense of security, a tangible expression of the profound and unexpected impact she had had on Eleanor's life, a recognition of the genuine connection they had forged in the crucible of their shared illness. And in making this significant decision, Eleanor knew, with a quiet certainty, that she would be making a powerful statement, not only to Michael and Emily, a silent acknowledgement of their absence and the consequences of their neglect, but also to herself, a reclaiming of agency and a declaration of her own worthiness of genuine connection and care. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a fragile flicker of hope began to ignite within her weary heart, a sense of purpose emerging from the depths of her loneliness. The weight of her decision felt significant, yet undeniably right, a quiet act of empowerment in the face of her vulnerability. As the night deepened, Eleanor drifted off to sleep, the image of Lily's kind and compassionate face a comforting and unexpected presence in her thoughts. The decision had come to her with a sudden clarity, yet in the quiet depths of her heart, Eleanor knew, with unwavering certainty, that it was the only true and authentic choice she had left. She couldn't continue to wait for her children to truly see her, to truly show up in the way she so desperately needed. She had given them a lifetime of unconditional love and unwavering support, and now, in her hour of greatest need, they had inadvertently shown her where she truly stood in their lives. The next day, Eleanor resolved, she would begin to set things right, for herself and for the young woman who had become her unexpected family. The quiet resolve that settled over Eleanor in the days following her heartfelt conversation with Lily about the revision of her will was a tangible and profound shift, a sense of finally reclaiming agency over her own narrative as the final chapters of her life unfolded. Lily, initially overwhelmed and feeling deeply undeserving of such a significant gesture, was ultimately moved beyond words by Eleanor's unwavering conviction and the depth of trust placed in her. The sterile atmosphere of the Portland hospital room seemed to soften slightly in the wake of this quiet understanding between them. In the subsequent days, Eleanor, with a newfound sense of purpose, diligently made the necessary arrangements with Mrs. Albright, the kind and empathetic lawyer who handled her affairs with remarkable sensitivity and a genuine understanding of Eleanor's wishes. The legal wheels began to turn with a quiet efficiency, a subtle hum of activity that provided a stark contrast to the often heavy emotional stillness that permeated Eleanor's hospital room. The silence from Michael and Emily, however, remained a heavy and unspoken question mark hanging in the sterile air, leaving Eleanor to brace herself for the inevitable emotional storm that she knew might eventually break upon the fragile peace she had begun to cultivate. When Michael finally arrived at Eleanor's bedside, his face a taut mask of barely suppressed anger and profound disbelief, the sterile hospital air seemed to crackle with unspoken accusations. His questions were sharp, his tone accusatory, his inability to comprehend his mother's decision radiating from him like a palpable force. Emily's visit followed a similar pattern, her resentment cloaked in a thin veneer of wounded concern and a bewildered sense of entitlement. Eleanor, however, met their agitated inquiries with a quiet and unwavering resolve, her inner strength bolstered by the constant and unspoken support of Lily, whose quiet presence by her side served as a silent testament to a bond her own children had, through their absence, inadvertently helped to forge. The ensuing legal battle, though emotionally and physically draining for Eleanor, became not just a fight for her modest estate, but a poignant and unexpected struggle for the very definition of her chosen family and the validation of her deeply personal final wishes. Throughout the often tense and emotionally charged legal proceedings, Eleanor, though her physical strength waned with each passing day, testified with a quiet dignity and an unwavering conviction that resonated deeply within the somber courtroom. She spoke of the genuine and profoundly meaningful connection she shared with Lily, a bond forged in the crucible of shared vulnerability and unexpected kindness, and contrasted it with the deep sense of isolation and abandonment she had experienced during her prolonged illness, a period marked by the disheartening absence of her own children. Lily, throughout the often accusatory and emotionally raw testimonies, remained Eleanor's steadfast anchor, her youthful strength and quiet composure a constant source of reassurance for the frail but resolute Eleanor. Weeks slowly bled into months, the sterile courtroom becoming an unlikely and poignant stage for the unraveling of long-held familial ties and the unexpected forging of a new and deeply meaningful connection. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of legal maneuvering and emotional strain, the long-awaited day of the judge's ruling arrived. The courtroom was thick with a palpable sense of anticipation, the air heavy with unspoken anxieties and lingering resentments. Eleanor, her frail hand clasped tightly in Lily's reassuring grip, waited with a quiet dignity for the pronouncement that would determine the final chapter of her wishes. The judge, a thoughtful and compassionate woman whose kind eyes had often rested on Eleanor during her heartfelt testimony, delivered her carefully considered verdict. She acknowledged the undeniable and lifelong familial bond between Eleanor and her biological children, but she also emphatically underscored Eleanor's fundamental and inalienable right to make her own decisions regarding the disposition of her estate, particularly in light of the specific and compelling circumstances of her illness and the demonstrable and genuine care provided by Lily during a time of profound and undeniable need. In a clear and decisive ruling that echoed through the hushed courtroom, the judge upheld the validity of Eleanor's revised will. Lily was declared the sole beneficiary of Eleanor's estate. A visible wave of profound and weary relief washed over Eleanor, followed by a deep and abiding sense of hard-won peace. She had, against considerable emotional and legal opposition, finally done what she truly believed was right, a quiet act of defiance against the loneliness that had threatened to consume her. Michael and Emily, their faces a complex and unreadable tapestry of stunned disbelief, lingering resentment, and perhaps a dawning flicker of regret, left the courtroom in a heavy and defeated silence, the profound weight of the judge's ruling seemingly settling upon their shoulders like an unwelcome burden. In the quiet aftermath of the emotionally charged legal battle, life within the sterile confines of the hospital slowly settled into a more subdued and predictable rhythm. The angry and accusatory phone calls and emails from Michael and Emily abruptly ceased, replaced by an unsettling and heavy silence that spoke volumes about the deeply fractured state of their familial bonds and the profound chasm that now separated them. Eleanor knew, with a quiet certainty that resonated deep within her, that while the legal fight might be over, the deep emotional wounds might never fully heal. As Eleanor's physical health continued its slow and inevitable decline, Lily's devotion and unwavering care deepened, her youthful presence becoming an even more steadfast source of comfort and quiet strength. They often spoke of Eleanor's long-held dream of finding a peaceful retreat, a small cottage nestled away from the relentless noise and demanding energy of the city. Despite her own youth and the vast expanse of open possibilities that lay before her, Lily embraced Eleanor's dream wholeheartedly, her own desire for a genuine and loving connection outweighing any personal ambitions. As the vibrant colors of autumn began their slow fade, Eleanor, with Lily's gentle assistance, made the final journey from the sterile hospital to their small, cozy cottage nestled beside a tranquil lake just outside of Portland. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the comforting scent of pine and damp earth, the profound silence of the natural surroundings a soothing balm to Eleanor's weary soul. The cottage, with its sun-drenched rooms overlooking the shimmering water and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, quickly became their cherished sanctuary. Michael and Emily never crossed its welcoming threshold. In Eleanor's final days, as the quiet beauty of winter gradually enveloped the landscape, casting a pristine blanket of white over the rolling hills and the still, reflective surface of the lake, a profound and serene peace settled over her. Holding Lily's hand, her gaze filled with a deep and abiding affection that transcended the simple bonds of blood, she acknowledged the unexpected and deeply cherished family she had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. "I found my family after all, didn't I, my dear one?" she whispered softly, a faint but genuine smile gracing her lips, a testament to the quiet joy that Lily had brought into her life. Lily's own youthful eyes filled with shimmering tears, a poignant mixture of sorrow for the impending loss and a profound and enduring love for the woman who had so unexpectedly and completely changed her life. "Yes, Eleanor," she replied, her voice thick with emotion but imbued with an unwavering certainty. "Yes, you did. We found each other." Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the home she had come to love and the unwavering and devoted love of the young woman who had become her daughter in spirit, her unexpected and cherished family. In the quiet days and weeks that followed Eleanor's passing, Lily grieved deeply for the loss of her beloved companion, but she found a profound and enduring solace in the wealth of beautiful and cherished memories they had created together within the warm and welcoming walls of their small cottage by the lake. She honored Eleanor's final wishes with meticulous care and deep respect, ensuring that her affairs were handled exactly as she had so clearly and thoughtfully desired. Months later, as the vibrant colors of spring painted the landscape with the promise of new beginnings, Lily often found herself sitting quietly on the porch of the cottage, the gentle warmth of the sun on her face a comforting embrace. The air hummed with the cheerful melodies of returning songbirds and carried the sweet fragrance of blossoming lilacs, a symphony of renewal that echoed the quiet joy and enduring peace that had slowly and gently returned to her own heart. In her hands, she often held a worn and treasured photograph, a candid snapshot of Eleanor and herself, captured during one of their happier days spent by the tranquil lake, both their faces etched with genuine affection and a deep, unspoken understanding that transcended the boundaries of age and circumstance. The anticipated and feared legal challenges from Michael and Emily had eventually and quietly ceased, fading away like the remnants of a forgotten storm. Perhaps, in the quiet solitude of their own lives, confronted with the irreversible finality of their mother's passing and the unwavering strength of her convictions, they had finally come to a place of quiet understanding, or at the very least, a grudging acceptance of their mother's deeply personal and ultimately peaceful decision. Lily didn't dwell on their potential regrets or lingering resentments, her focus firmly rooted in the enduring legacy of love and connection that Eleanor had so generously bestowed upon her. In the unexpected embrace of Eleanor's chosen family, Lily had found not just a physical home but a profound and enduring sense of belonging, a deep and meaningful connection that transcended the traditional and often fragile bonds of blood and societal expectation. The small, cozy cottage by the lake, once a place of quiet solitude after Eleanor's passing, was now filled with the cherished echoes of laughter, shared stories whispered by the crackling fire, and the tangible warmth of an unconditional love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. The memory of the cold hearth in the Willow Creek house, a poignant symbol of Eleanor's isolation in her final years with her biological family, now served as a stark and powerful contrast to the enduring warmth that permeated every corner of the little cottage by the lake. Here, a new kind of family had been lovingly kindled, a family built not on obligation or expectation, but on the enduring strength of an unexpected kinship, a powerful and heartwarming testament to the enduring power of genuine human connection and the profound truth that family isn't always defined by the happenstance of blood, but by the boundless and unwavering love that binds two kindred hearts together in the most surprising and meaningful of ways. And in that quiet and enduring peace, surrounded by the tranquil beauty of the natural world that Eleanor had also come to deeply cherish, Lily knew with a deep and unwavering certainty that Eleanor's story, their shared story, had finally reached a satisfying, meaningful, and ultimately hopeful conclusion, a quiet triumph of the heart over the often unyielding expectations of tradition.